There's a lot of things to have a look at here. I think we just wander around and see what takes.
See what we find.
This looks good.
It looks incredible. It looks like an art installation.
So Dan, amazing to be in the Science Museum, surrounded by some of the earliest computers, a huge amount of information, some phenomenal pieces of history that can really teach us about information and data. I've always been fascinated by your approach to culture, to hiring, to giving people very clear directive, but at the same time allowing them to kind of, be themselves at work and explore other opportunities.
It struck me from pretty early on that the dynamic in society speaks about this idea of work-life balance, and I despise that. I think it's criminal in some ways to suggest that your work shouldn't be your life, and the two should be separated.
Totally agree. What should it be called?
Life balance, or whatever, or just work. So everything that I've tried to do is built around that idea that not that every day is the greatest day of someone's life, but when they come to work, they should look forward to it, be challenged, and then sort of seamlessly go home into their social activities that are part of the same day.
I see my colleagues a lot more than I see my family, unfortunately, during the week. But
which is why it's important to me that we set up structures where people can actually be friends, and part and parcel of that is breaking out of the mould of what you might call traditional kind of competitive structures where people are individually assessed and one person's success is dependent on another person's lack of success.
Exactly.
We're looking at the history of the internet here because I can spot Alta Vista down there.
Oh, wow.
Which I think was the first search engine I used.
Pre-Google?
Pre-Google. Do you remember your first internet search?
I remember my first Google search actually was Tottenham Hotspur, unfortunately. It's a bit sad, I know, but I just wanted to see what information came up. I know when you set up your agency, you never wanted to be like a traditional agency. You've got really, really strong views about where the agency sector is going. Because you started 7 years ago, you've had the opportunity to look at everything that's happened previously. And so as a result, you've been able to focus much more heavily on the things that we now know are significantly more important, like the use of data, like the use of automation. Some of the people that you've hired as a result, like mathematicians, computer science graduates, very different from an existing agency model.
I share a former employer with you because I used to be at Google. We knew each other then. And that was when it became quite obvious to me that there was this new style of marketing that looked really different to everything that you'd seen before. So, Google, the first probably mainstream version of biddable media, and suddenly we have this auction where you can log in real time and everyone bids on the inventory across trillions, literally trillions of different data points to make a decision about the type of media that they're purchasing. And you can contrast that with traditional media, for example, TV, print, so on and so forth, which require a slightly different skill set, so more strategic planning, campaign execution, and reporting on that afterwards. That kind of changed overnight with the emergence of digital or biddable. And with it brought a whole new set of challenges, and with that, skill sets required to manage that level of complexity. So it wasn't necessarily that we exclusively hire mathematicians and programmers and scientists, but that the new type of marketing has to blend that side of things with the more traditional, how do we target customers?
As an agency, you were early users, heavy users of our automation products. One of the pushbacks sometimes on automation is, well, this is my control from a human's perspective. This is my control. So how have your team managed to embrace automation but still add that huge amount of value to the client?
So I think the way that we think about automation is, it probably stems, if I'm brutally honest, from laziness, which is when you're doing boring tasks day to day, and smart people are doing that, they try and work out ways to automate those things so they don't have to ever do it again. So we don't lament that in the slightest. I think it's exciting to think about the even more interesting work that we can do when computers, machines, robots and algorithms have replaced what currently is difficult work.
So take the heavy lifting, give it to a computer, we can then actually use our brains in a very different way to produce even more value for our clients.
Yeah, in some ways allowing us to become even more human and tap into what it is that really allows us to think differently to machines. What was your first phone call? So
I only used to phone my home because I was the only one who had a mobile phone. But then I had it for about a month, and then I encouraged my girlfriend to get one. Because I was like, honestly, this is brilliant, and I want to talk to you on the phone.
That was the beginning of your love story with mobile phones.
What we're seeing now is people using YouTube to drive performance metrics to use YouTube in its purest biddable state?
Yeah, it's a fascinating development for us because it's kind of the convergence or the middle ground between traditional TV and search advertising. YouTube sits more on the programmatic side, clearly, and therefore allows us to tap into a bunch of different audience segments and at the same time serve different creative to each of those. So it's swinging way more towards the more modern biddable media side that you get in search, where it's kind of like a single ad that matches closely with user intent. So the interesting part about that is that it's kind of merging the creative and the media together in one platform and shifting what might have been considered like more brand-driven style into kind of a performance matrix, which is super interesting for us because we like marketing that we can measure the performance of.
For many years, there's been a kind of a perception about what works and what doesn't in terms of TV.
Yeah.
And certainly, what we've seen is that some of those rules don't apply anymore.
Yeah.
And so, so long as there's something incredibly clear about the messaging that's going on there within that ad, depending on how big it is, you can still deliver fantastic results.
Yeah.
How are you thinking about creative?
I suppose taking you back to what you just said about the rules, some of these rules don't work anymore.
Yeah.
I think now that we're measuring it, we're finding out if those rules were true in the first place.
Yeah.
And what I find quite humbling about digital media or measurable media is that it's not the highest paid opinion that works or the ingenious creative or even the managing director. It's kind of like
the data.
You put stuff out there and your customers tell you through YouTube, through search, etc., by engaging, interacting, clicking, purchasing, whatever it might be, however you're measuring it, they're telling you what's working and what's not, which I find fascinating. And it's a cultural shift in how we think about how does one create good creative. This looks like the new cold brew coffee machine that they've got at Google HQ, right?
So this, I believe, was the machine that first broadcast BBC.
It's amazing to think about how accessible the world's information has become. That it's not just one person's opinion.
Not one person's opinion, and at the time this was just transmitting to London. That's all you could do.
Yeah.
So now everyone's got the opportunity to put something out there, and have that voice. It's taken sort of almost until the last few years for clients really start to understand the importance of their data, and that they should, for want of a better phrase, own their data.
Yeah. We have always tried to drive this conversation and direct people's attention to it, because I think a lot of the chat was about transparency and markups and rebates and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
In the background, the more valuable asset is the data. I think as clients think about what should their role and shouldn't it be, by all means bring in an agency to advise on what their data strategy should look like, but own that plan in-house, because if you don't own that, then you can't say how to put together all of the different pieces. Yeah.
Something else that's been massively hot in the press has been transparency and actually trust in advertising more generally.
I think we were fortunate enough to benefit from starting as primarily Google search agency, and that's kind of built into the platform already to an extent. So when you're delivering search ads, people understand that it's in Google's terms and conditions that you can't mess around with it, you can't mark it up. You have an obligation to report precisely for customers on what the data was and how much they spent and where, et cetera, et cetera. I suppose what's interesting for me is that we go up the biddable chain towards YouTube, programmatic, and so on and so forth is, back to you, what Google is doing in that space to make sure that you have that same amazing ecosystem that you have on search, where there's constant feedback from customers and almost guaranteed transparency in the kind of more video and display area.
It's a great point. I mean, we've got a responsibility to create, and we want to create a sustainable ecosystem, better for users, better for publishers, better for advertisers. And without those three things constantly working together, trust in advertising isn't going to get back to where we want it to. If we can get those three elements working, we can actually start to do what advertising is really all about, which is showing, the right ad at the right time to the right person.
Yeah.
But doing it in a way that's, it's timely, and it's adding value. And I think that's the bit that we can really do in a way that we just couldn't do previously.
Absolutely. You experience that, and if you need reminding of the progress that Google and the ecosystem have made in the space, then it's quite an interesting exercise to go and watch live TV. and back to back to back,
Yep.
3-4 minutes worth of ads, it becomes genuinely painful because we've now accustomed to, okay, I'm going to go on YouTube and I'll see one pre-roll that is probably targeted to me based on some of my previous browsing behaviour, what I've told Google, what I haven't told Google,
Yep.
so on and so forth.
It brings us right back to the beginning. We're only going to do that by constantly analysing the data, constantly listening to what the consumers are telling us via that data,
Yeah.
constantly refining and improving the product, and working absolutely in partnership to deliver that.
Yeah.
And so look, we're in this amazing space. Fancy having a quick look around?
Absolutely. Normally
Brilliant.
when I come here, my kids are dragging me all over the place to push buttons. So
We can do that too.
All right, fine.
I can push buttons.